Hey everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today with my friends from AllFreeKnitting.com I am going to show you how you can dye yarn using an Easter egg coloring kit. I picked this kit up from my local supermarket for 50 cents now that Easter is over. And while the kit comes with a lot of things, I'm really interested in these tablets of food coloring. And these are what I'm going to use to dye the yarn. Now, in many of my yarn tutorials, I show you how I use vinegar to help as the acid source to help the dye stick to the yarn. But these tablets come with citric acid, a different acid source already in them. So we may or may not need to add additional vinegar to help the yarn or to help the dye stick to the yarn. For yarn, I'm using 100 grams of this bare fingering weight wool from Knit Picks. I soaked the yarn in water, just plain water, for 30 minutes before adding it to this pot on the stove with 8 cups of water. The 8 cups are so that there's water enough to cover the yarn with a little excess in case some evaporates. You certainly don't want to burn your yarn. So I'm turning the stove on to medium heat, and I'm going to add the lid to bring this pot to a soft boiler when it just barely starts to boil. And that's when I'm going to add the dye. I'm choosing to do this because I want there to be more variation in the tones of my yarn. But you can certainly dissolve our handy little dye pellets, or the colors that you choose. You can certainly dissolve them in water first and add them to the dye bath before you start heating it if you want a more uniform color. Our pot is lightly simmering. Remove the cover. And at first I'm just going to add 2 whole pellets. I've selected a red and yellow pellet for the beginning, and I'm going to place one on either side and kind of use the spoon to push it down. Whoops. I don't want to stir the pot. You can see this dot of color going across. I don't want to stir it because I don't want to felt the yarn. But the color will, presumably spread. We'll see. This is why I'm moving it a little to give the color a little more access than to just the spot where I placed it. But alright. You can see that it's becoming kind of orange at the sides. So I am now going to leave this until the yarn has absorbed most of the color. Well, it's steaming up, so I'll let you take another look to see how the color has spread with very little movement. I'm also going to reduce the heat so that way it's a very low simmer. Hey everyone, it's been 10 minutes and my yarn has been sitting here bubbling wonderfully. And if I move it to the side gently so not to felt my wool yarn, you can see that there's still a fair amount of color in the dye bath. To help things speed up, I am going to add some vinegar. As I stated at the beginning, there's about 8 cups of water in here, and I'm going to add a single tablespoon of white vinegar to help the color absorb. So I've poured it, and I'm just going to gently drizzle it around. Now, with reds, you want to be careful when adding vinegar because too much acid can cause the dye to crash out of solution. But this should help the color absorb to the yarn a bit better. It's only been 2 minutes since I added the vinegar, and it might be hard for you to see, but there's already a lot more color on the yarn than there was previously. So while I guess the amount of citric acid in the pellets may be nice for enough for eggs, the box instructions do say to add vinegar if you want a more vibrant color. It's been about 6 minutes since I added the tablespoon of vinegar, and you can see that while there is still some color in the dye bath, most of it is in the yarn. So at this point I am actually going to turn off the heat and let the yarn cool while in the dye bath. I'm going to put the lid on just so that way not too much water evaporates. I will also mention that I am just wearing gloves to keep my hands dye free, not because any of the materials that I've been using in this tutorial are dangerous. So now I'm just going to wait and let this cool until I can handle the yarn comfortably. The water has pretty much cleared. There's a little bit of yellow left, but I am happy with the color of my yarn. So the pot is still too hot to really touch, but I'm going to gently lift the yarn out, let some of the water drain, and put it into a secondary container so it'll cool a bit faster. Alright, now here we are washing. You can see the water is pretty clear, but washing our beautiful orange Easter egg dyed yarn. I'm using a little bit of dish soap, just a tiny little bit in the water to help any color come out. There's, I see a tiny bit of yellow, but that could also be due to the dish soap. And so I'm curious if there's any subtleties to the color of this yarn. And some of that will be hard. I mean, there are some that I can see, but some of it will be hard to really notice until the yarn is dry. So I'll be back and show you the final product. So I feel like doing a little experiment as part of this Easter egg dyeing tutorial, and to do another 100 gram skein of yarn in the same colorway, but this time starting by adding the tablespoon of vinegar at the beginning of the process. So I'm once again going to soak the yarn for 30 minutes, heat up the dye bath, and then add the 2 tablets. And we'll see if this time the color is a little less uniform. Alright, my dye bath is simmering and I'm now ready to add the color tablets. As before, I'm going to add one to either end. I'm going to make like a little pocket to add the yellow to one side and the red to the other. This time, as I said before, there's vinegar in the pot, and so we should see the color more variety, I guess, but we should see a less consistent color overall. So we'll see how far this spreads and how much sticks to the end. But, you know, I'm curious to see what happens when we start off with vinegar in the solution. So I've reduced the heat to a simmer. I'm going to cover it and we'll be back to see what happens. Alright, it's been 10 minutes and already you should be able to see a difference from last time. There is a section that is clearly more red and a section more yellow and with orange in the middle. So adding vinegar at the beginning will help the colors absorb to the yarn right away, which is showing that in the Easter egg dyeing kit that I have, there really isn't enough citric acid to dye the yarn brightly colors. I'm loving the way the colors are right now and I don't want to move it yet, so I'm going to let this continue simmering for another 5 minutes, and then I'm going to turn off the heat and let it sit. Alright, here I am cleaning off the sunrise with a little bit of dish soap like before, and you'll see a comparison very shortly when they're dry. So here are our Easter egg kit dyed yarns. These were dyed in the same way using the same color pellets, but the only difference between the two was that in this case we added vinegar to the dye bath from the beginning, and in this case we added vinegar after we had added the dye. So if I just open up these skeins a bit, you can see that we still have some fluctuations in the orange color in that one, but it's much more consistent. And then in the case where we added vinegar sooner, we really get this beautiful space-dyed effect. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial on dyeing yarn with an Easter egg dyeing kit. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and this video was brought to you by AllFreeKnitting.com.